In December 2021, 82-year-old Evelyn Whitmore passed away in her sleep at her estate in Inveridge County, Pennsylvania. She left behind no children, no spouse, and no known immediate relatives, only a four-bedroom stone manor built in 1919 and an estate valued at just under $3.6 million. Her will filed 2 years earlier named the sole beneficiary as the Inveridge Literacy Foundation, a nonprofit she had donated to regularly for over a decade. Probate was simple, no disputes, no complications, until the following August when a second will surfaced. It arrived by certified mail to the office of Frederick Harlan, a retired estate attorney in Harrisburg. Inside a weathered envelope, a notarized copy of a document dated 6 weeks before Evelyn's death. It listed a new sole beneficiary, Michael Whitmore, nephew. The signature matched, the notary stamp was real, and the envelope bore Evelyn's return address. According to Harlan, the will had been drafted but never filed. He claimed Evelyn had contacted him personally requesting a last-minute change due to renewed contact with family. That change had never been disclosed. Now it challenged the entire probate decision. Michael Whitmore, 33, had grown up in Pittsburgh, the only child of Evelyn's estranged younger brother. After graduating from college, he had briefly lived with Evelyn in 2011 before moving to Chicago. They hadn't spoken since 2013. He had not attended her funeral, but when contacted by Frederick Harlan, he confirmed the relationship. He submitted identification. He hired a probate lawyer. 2 weeks later, a hearing was held in county court. The judge ruled that the second will was legally valid and appeared genuine. The estate was reopened, and Michael was named heir. On September 3, 2022, Michael arrived at the Whitmore property in Inveridge to take possession of the house. Neighbors reported seeing him unlock the front gate just after 4:15 p.m. He carried one suitcase, a messenger bag, and a file folder. He waved politely to a passing dog walker. The porch light turned on at dusk. The next morning, the lawn sprinkler turned on automatically at 7:00 a.m. as programmed. By 9:00 a.m., the front door was ajar. By 10:30, a delivery driver reported the door wide open and the house oddly quiet. By noon, police were on site, and Michael Whitmore was gone. His car, a silver 2008 Toyota Camry, was still in the driveway. His suitcase sat unopened in the upstairs guest room. His wallet and phone were on the hallway table. No signs of forced entry, no broken glass, no blood, nothing missing. The only anomaly, the interior security system had been shut off manually sometime between 5:00 and 6:00 p.m. the night before. And in the basement wine cellar, one bottle of Bordeaux lay shattered on the stone floor. Investigators reviewed the house's exterior cameras. The feed cut off at exactly 5:41 p.m. Not because of a power outage, because someone had removed the storage drive from the back of the unit. The police interviewed neighbors, searched the grounds, checked nearby properties. Nothing. Michael Whitmore had entered the house alone and never came out. Within 3 days of Michael Whitmore's disappearance, the Inveridge Police Department escalated the investigation from a welfare check to a missing persons case with suspicious circumstances. A search warrant was obtained for the Whitmore property. Officers combed through the main house basement and detached garage. Nothing suggested a struggle. There were no drag marks, no blood traces, no signs of forced exit. But in the attic inside a locked cedar chest, officers found a folder labeled Wills and Revocations, 1989-2019. Inside were 4 previously unknown versions of Evelyn Whitmore's will, each one named a different beneficiary. A cousin from Delaware, 1989, a private nurse, 1994, a former housekeeper, 2002, her secretary, Denise Fallon, 2013. None of them had been mentioned in her final 2020 will or the revised 2021 version Michael had used to claim inheritance. Moreno, now lead investigator on the case, began background checks on each name. 3 were alive and reachable. All confirmed they had worked for Evelyn at one point, had a close relationship, and had been told they would one day be rewarded. None had contested her estate. All said the same thing. She changed her mind a lot. She could be warm one day, cold the next. We didn't ask questions. She didn't offer answers. Only one name led nowhere. Denise Fallon, former secretary. Address listed in Easton, Pennsylvania. Phone line disconnected. No tax record past 2009. No known relatives. Further investigation showed she'd been reported missing in 2009 by a neighbor, case closed after 2 months with no leads. Evelyn had been interviewed at the time. claimed Fallon quit suddenly and left town after a personal dispute. No foul play suspected. The case was reopened. Fallon had worked at the Whitmore estate for 7 years. No family, no children. Lived in a small cottage on the edge of the property, rent-free. That cottage was now used for storage. Detectives obtained access. Inside dust boxes, cobwebs. And one item that caught their attention, an old Rolodex still sitting on the desk. Between F and G, one card stood out. Lawrence, Roth attorney, private copy, not to be filed. It listed a number now disconnected. But the name matched a law partner who had once worked with Frederick Harlan, the attorney who surfaced Evelyn's second will. Harlan claimed to have no recollection of the name, but public records showed a Lawrence Roth had died in 2017, leaving behind a private document archive, now in custody of his former firm. Detectives requested access. In the archive, they found a notarized memo written by Roth in 2009. It referenced a will prepared for Evelyn Whitmore, naming Denise Fallon as sole beneficiary, dated May 3, 2009. It included a postscript. Client expressed concern with family manipulation and indicated desire to formalize this version quickly. Warned me not to inform Harlan until further notice. It was signed, stamped, and never filed. Police requested an exhumation order for the area surrounding the Whitmore property, specifically the old rose garden behind the cottage. Ground-penetrating radar revealed no major disturbances, but a cadaver dog alerted near the base of the retaining wall. A week later, partial remains were recovered in a shallow grave, wrapped in what appeared to be a secretary's cardigan. Dental records would later confirm Denise Fallon, deceased, estimated time of death, summer 2009. Caused blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. Detective Moreno began to reconsider everything. Evelyn Whitmore hadn't just changed wills frequently. People mentioned in those wills had a tendency to disappear. In the weeks following the discovery of Denise Fallon's remains, the Whitmore case officially shifted from a missing persons investigation to a possible pattern of homicides tied to inheritance fraud. Detective April Moreno requested full access to Evelyn Whitmore's legal correspondence over the previous 15 years. Much of it was mundane donations, estate tax filings, real estate appraisals. But one name appeared frequently in the margins of handwritten letters and attorney notes, usually accompanied by small check marks. M delivered. Have AM handle courier. AM will drop at firm. AM wasn't a known law clerk or firm employee. A deeper look through estate payroll records identified the name. Angela Merrick, caregiver. Hired in 2018 through a private agency. Background clean. Last pay stub issued August 30, 2022, 3 days before Michael arrived at the house. No contact since. Angela Merrick had been assigned as Evelyn's live-in aide during the last 3 years of her life. She handled medications appointments and, according to multiple documents, served as Evelyn's personal courier for legal and financial matters. She was listed as a witness on the notarized 2021 will that granted Michael full inheritance. That version of the will had been delivered by hand to Frederick Harlan's office. And Harlan had written a name at the bottom corner of his intake log. Delivered by A. Merrick. But Merrick hadn't been seen since Evelyn's death. The agency she worked for hadn't heard from her. Her listed apartment in Allentown had been vacated 2 weeks after Evelyn passed. Mail uncollected. Power shut off. The building manager assumed she had moved after the old woman died. No forwarding address. Detective Moreno requested security footage from the Inveridge post office for August 29-31. She reviewed hours of tape. On August 30th at 12 p.m., a woman matching Angela Merrick's description entered the branch carrying a thick envelope. She spoke briefly to the clerk, then walked out. That envelope would later be confirmed as the delivery containing the second will. She did not appear on any footage after that. A week later, a call came in from a caretaker at a cemetery on the outskirts of Inveridge. He reported a broken lock on one of the private family crypts. It was the Whitmore vault. Inside, nothing had been taken. But behind the marble bench in the dirt where fresh landscaping had been done that spring, police found a small buried parcel wrapped in cloth. Inside, a broken phone, a wallet containing ID for Angela Merrick, and a single key. The key had no markings, no chain. But Evelyn's housekeeper, when shown the item, confirmed it matched the wine cellar's lower storage cage, a section of the basement rarely used, kept locked at all times. Police re-entered the house. Inside the cellar, behind a row of vintage Riesling bottles, they unlocked the cage. Inside a folded cot, a half-used flashlight, a scarf, a thermos, and a notepad. The last page read, "He's in the house. I think he knows I know." There was no signature, but the handwriting matched a card recovered from Evelyn's upstairs desk signed AM. The notepad retrieved from the cellar cage was submitted to forensic examination the same day it was recovered. The ink was fresh, estimated written no more than 2 to 3 weeks before the house was searched. Only the last page held writing, and a single line had been scratched in the bottom margin in smaller, less legible script. "If I'm gone, look under the kitchen tiles." Detective Moreno ordered the kitchen sealed. By noon the next day, a team removed the wood-paneled island, pried up the central section of floor tile, and uncovered a shallow compartment covered in gray insulation. Inside were 2 items: a USB drive, a second unsigned will. The USB drive contained scanned copies of handwritten notes, dated logs, and 1 short video file. The video timestamp September 2nd, the day before Michael Whitmore vanished, showed Angela Merrick sitting in what appeared to be Evelyn Whitmore's study. Her face was pale, her voice calm. "If you're seeing this, I've probably already left the house, or someone's made sure I can't speak." Evelyn changed her will 6 weeks before she died, but not because she wanted to. She was afraid. She said Michael had called her twice, said someone told him the foundation would be contesting the inheritance. He insisted she re-sign something, even though she already had. Angela paused. "I don't think it was Michael who wanted the change. I think someone was telling him what to say. I didn't know what to do." She looked away from the camera. "But I'm not staying here." The video ended. The unsigned will found with the USB was nearly identical to the contested one, except the final beneficiary line had been left blank. No name, no instruction. But in the margins were notes. "Too late. He's already coming. She's too tired to argue. He's staying the night." The last confirmed image of Michael Whitmore alive came from the porch camera, him entering the front door just after 4:15 p.m. The footage after that was missing, but the interior power logs showed a manual override on the security panel at 5:39 p.m. The same time the porch camera stopped recording. Forensics re-examined the cellar. Luminol tests found traces of blood along the base of the south wall, nearly invisible to the eye. DNA results were inconclusive, too degraded, but not animal. Moreno stood at the edge of the room and ran her hand along the inner wall. There was a faint sound when she knocked. Hollow. Cadaver dogs were brought in. At 3:42 p.m., one alerted. The wall panel came down 15 minutes later. Behind it, a crawl space, narrow, cold. And at the back, covered by a plastic tarp and dried insulation, a body, wrapped in a blanket, face down. Dental records would confirm what Moreno already knew. Michael Whitmore, deceased. Cause of death, blunt force trauma. Time of death estimated 16-20 hours after arrival. The media broke the story the next morning. Whitmore heir found dead on family estate. Second inheritance controversy turns homicide investigation. But inside the command post, the attention shifted elsewhere. Because the USB drive's metadata showed it had been connected to a Wi-Fi network once after the video was recorded. 3 days later, from a public library in central New Jersey, logged under a temporary user ID, Angela Merrick was alive, and she was watching. The IP address that logged into the temporary library session user ID, A Merrick Watch, was traced to a public access terminal in downtown Trenton, New Jersey. The login lasted 9 minutes. During that window, 2 actions occurred. An email was sent to a law firm in Philadelphia, marked legal correspondence sealed. A shipping label was printed addressed to a firm called Brenton and Sharp Attention Line. C.O. Deborah C. Allister. Moreno contacted the firm. They confirmed receipt of the package. It had arrived by courier 2 days earlier, a brown envelope containing a single item, a photocopy of a will draft dated 2015. The recipient listed Deborah C. Allister, caregiver and estate executor. Deborah Allister had worked for Evelyn Whitmore briefly in 2015 as a live-in aide during a hip surgery recovery. Her name had been listed on a 2015 will draft as co-beneficiary alongside the Inveridge Literacy Foundation. That will had never been signed. The version had a handwritten note on page 2. Too eager, not loyal, remove. Allister left the job after 3 months citing personality conflict. She moved to Philadelphia and became a freelance caregiver. She never contested Evelyn's estate. Until now. Moreno requested a formal interview. Alistair declined. She was represented by counsel who issued a statement. Ms. Alistair has no knowledge of any current estate proceedings and has not engaged in any attempt to influence, claim, or redirect Evelyn Whitmore's assets. She has received unsolicited correspondence and immediately referred it to our office. But financial records showed something else. 2 weeks before Evelyn's death, Alistair deposited a check $12,000 drawn from a cashier's account tied to a private third-party donor. The memo line consultation, end-of-life planning. The issuing party a trust account linked to a now-deceased man named Leo Brandt, a former partner of Evelyn's brother. Brandt died in 2019. The trust hadn't issued payments in years. Until that one. Moreno began to dig. Court filings, past employers, secondary wills. And one thread kept returning. People who had once been written into Evelyn Whitmore's estate, then removed, didn't just go away. They watched. They waited. And in some cases, they came back. That night, Moreno reviewed the handwritten note Angela had left beneath the kitchen floor. He's in the house. I think he knows I know. But she'd always assumed he meant Michael. Now she wasn't sure. Because the handwriting in the margin of the unsigned 2015 will the words, "not loyal," "remove," didn't match Evelyn's. It matched Angela Merrick's, but written as if it were Evelyn's voice. Someone had forged Evelyn's hand more than once. And someone had planted will after will, swapping names, shifting loyalties, moving pieces across paper. And that someone was still shaping the story. Angela Merrick was found 8 days later. She was living under the name Rachel Hannigan, renting a room above a thrift store in a small town outside Trenton, New Jersey. She worked part-time in the stockroom, paid cash, kept no phone. The store owner said she seemed polite, never talked about her past, and always left on foot. When agents knocked, she didn't run. She opened the door, stepped aside, and said only one thing. "Took you long enough." At the field office, she declined a lawyer. She signed the waiver, sat down. Calm, straight-backed, clear. Agent Keys opened the recorder. "State your name for the record." A pause. Then, "Moi c'est one. Angela Merrick, formerly employed by Evelyn Whitmore from 2018 to 2021. Last known witness to Michael Whitmore's arrival at the Inveridge property." Keys asked, "Why did you run?" She folded her hands. "Because I wasn't sure who would come for me first. You, or the people still circling the house." Moreno leaned forward. "You're not just a witness. You orchestrated part of this." Angela nodded. "I made copies. I carried wills. I destroyed others. I wrote in her hand when she couldn't hold a pen. And Michael..." Another pause. Michael wasn't supposed to stay. He came to sign papers, collect what he thought was his, and leave. But he started asking questions. About the house, the old staff, the second keys. And I wasn't the only one listening. Angela reached into her bag and slid a small notebook across the table. Inside were dates, names, phrases, most already known. But one name appeared more than any other. D. Alistair. D. Alistair watched the change happen. D. Alistair came back after the surgery. D. Alistair threatened to expose the rotations. D. Alistair and Evelyn quiet fight March 2020. D. Alistair was removed, but not really. You're saying Deborah Alistair was involved in Michael's death? Angela shook her head. I'm saying Evelyn didn't change the will alone. And when she changed it back, someone made sure that choice didn't matter. Keys asked, "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Angela looked at him. Because every person Evelyn removed from her will disappeared. 2 days later, Deborah Alistair was arrested in Philadelphia on charges of estate fraud, obstruction, and conspiracy. At the time of arrest, she was in possession of 3 unsigned versions of Evelyn's will, 2 forged medical declarations, a burner phone with texts referencing Evelyn's health. It's time, start prepping the new copy. She denied involvement in Michael's death, but her prints were found on the inside of the wine cellar door. And a half-burned envelope addressed to her was recovered behind the guest room heater at the Whitmore house. Inside a check for $30,000. Signed M. Whitmore. Moreno reviewed every document, every statement. Angela never asked for protection. She declined relocation. Her final comment during debriefing, it was never about the money. It was about who stayed alive long enough to claim it. With Angela Merrick and Deborah Allister both in custody, the formal narrative of Evelyn Whitmore's estate was beginning to take shape. But something still didn't fit. Detective Moreno requested a full audit of all known versions of Evelyn's will, both filed and unfiled. By the time the copies were laid out in the case room, 13 in total, a pattern emerged. Evelyn had changed her primary beneficiary 7 times in 30 years. But only 4 of those people were traceable. 3 were dead. 1 had vanished. 1 will stood out. Dated January 18, 1989, it named a then 27-year-old man as full beneficiary. Caleb Ross Whitmore listed as ward of family, companion, permanent resident. No one on the team had heard the name before. No obituary, no next of kin, no census listing past 1992. The will had been revoked the following year, replaced with one naming a cousin from Delaware. No explanation given. On the 1989 version, however, a note had been handwritten across the margin in faded blue ink. Too volatile, not suitable. It was initialed EW. The team searched for Caleb Ross Whitmore. No match. But a tip came in from a niche collector of historically disputed estates, a man named Julius Fenn, based in Raleigh, North Carolina. He claimed to have just purchased an early unpublished copy of Evelyn Whitmore's will from a private seller on an estate forum. Dated January 1989, stamped, original, notarized. The seller, a man using the handle Whitmore Still Standing. Payment had been processed through a P.O. box address in Western New York. A man named Ross Callan, age 61. A quick search confirmed Ross Callan had no criminal record, but had once filed a name change from Caleb R. Whitmore in 1993. He'd been living under the new name ever since. He currently operated a used book and document shop in Chautauqua County. Moreno flew out 2 days later. The store was small, dimly lit, filled with old paper and the scent of dried glue. Ross Callan stood behind the counter. She showed her badge. He didn't flinch. Didn't smile. She just said, "I wondered how long it would take." Inside his office, he brought out a cardboard box marked simply Inheritance. Not for resale. He opened it slowly. Inside, a photo of himself in 1988 seated on the Whitmore back patio, a brass key, 3 folded letters signed Evelyn, and a journal. Moreno opened to the first page, written in tight cursive script. "I thought I was the first. I wasn't." Ross sat down. "She told me I was family," he said, "that I'd earned it, that the house would be mine." And then Moreno asked, "She said I talked too much, that I asked about things I didn't need to know." He paused. "I was gone by spring." Detective Moreno read through the journal over the course of 2 nights. Written by Caleb Ross Whitmore now, Ross Callan, the entries spanned just under 7 months from June 1988 to January 1989. Most pages were routine daily chores, tension in the house, Evelyn's shifting moods. But certain entries stood out. June 12, 1988, first time I have heard her call someone else by name after dinner. A man. Deep voice. "I thought I was the only one staying here." July 4th, 1988. "He was in the hallway last night. Didn't know I was awake. Stood outside Evelyn's door for a full minute. Never knocked. Just listened." August 22nd, 1988. "She told me to never go into the basement without asking. Said the other guests needed privacy." October 5th, 1988. "He doesn't speak to me. Doesn't eat in front of others. Always wearing gloves. Sometimes I think I dreamed him." December 29th, 1988. "He watched me from the study while I packed. I asked Evelyn who he was. She didn't answer. She just said, 'Don't worry, he's always been with us.' No name was ever given. Ross referred to him only as the other watcher." The team searched payrolls, hired help, residency permits. No male staff were employed in 1988. No visiting relatives. No medical caregivers, no tax documents for boarders, no tenant agreements. Whoever the other watcher was, he never officially existed in Evelyn's records. But he had been there. And Ross wasn't the only one who saw him. Angela Merrick, when shown the journal, went quiet for a long time. Then said, "Shashin, I thought I was the first to keep a record. But I wasn't." She flipped to the December 29th entry. "I found a note in the furnace," once she said. Old handwriting. Said something like, "He sees who's chosen even when Evelyn forgets." I thought she wrote it. She looked at the page again. Maybe she didn't. That same night, agents re-examined the crawl space behind the cellar wall where Michael Whitmore's body had been found. This time they scanned the masonry itself. On the inside corner of the west foundation, etched into a support beam in faint gouges, CRW, Chonioininoiv. Below it less clearly, Arsh's gone but not gone. And beneath both, Duranbayu. Just that. One letter. No handwriting match, no identity confirmed, but the implication was enough. There had been someone in the house Evelyn never named, someone who knew each rotation of the will, someone who saw who was in and who was out, someone who over time simply became the watcher. And still might be. The order to dismantle the Whitmore estate came down on a Wednesday. Formally, it was labeled Forensic Clearance and Structure Audit. Unofficially, it was a last-ditch attempt to uncover physical evidence before the structure was seized by probate court and passed to the state. After months of legal maneuvering, there was little left to protect. Evelyn Whitmore's legacy had collapsed under the weight of 5 contested wills, 3 deaths, 2 disappearances, and 1 surviving house. Now that house was coming down. Demolition began with the rear storage wing. Wall panels, closets, rafters, all stripped to the studs. On the second day, the interior crew reached the master bedroom on the 2nd floor, the one Evelyn had occupied for nearly 3 decades. A room that had been meticulously preserved, nearly untouched since her death. At 10:13 a.m., while removing a section of plaster near the fireplace, a worker's crowbar struck something hollow behind the wall. Not air, not pipe. Wood. A panel. The panel was wedged between brick and insulation, forming a narrow compartment between the original wall and a 1997 renovation overlay. It had no visible latch, no hinges. They pried it open. Behind it, a narrow crawl space, no wider than 30 inches, running parallel to the wall between the bedroom and the hallway closet. Inside, coiled in a corner, a thin, flattened camping mat, an old metal flashlight, 4 crumpled cigarette packs brand Lucky Strike, a tin cup, a plastic grocery bag with wrappers, and balanced neatly on a small wooden crate, a cassette recorder. The device was old, Sony circa mid-1990s, dust-covered but intact. And the battery light, when tested, still flickered red. The entire crew was cleared from the room. Detective Moreno arrived within 45 minutes. She stood at the edge of the opening and stared into the space. It didn't look like a hiding place. It looked like someone had lived there. The recorder was taken into evidence and transported to the forensics lab. The cassette inside was standard 60-minute stock, labeled only with a piece of yellowing tape, Backwatch A. It was rewound manually, then played. The first 10 minutes were static, then faint. Sound of footsteps overhead, clink of glass, a door creaking, then a voicemail quiet near the mic. She's talking to the nurse again, changing it. 30 seconds of silence. Then he doesn't belong here. None of them do. A long pause. Then barely audible. I was the first, I'll be the last. There were at least 7 such segments across the tape. Most included environmental sounds, footsteps, Evelyn's voice muffled through walls, doors, opening, paper rustling. But interspersed were whispers, murmurs, and monologues, short-controlled, chilling in their stillness. A second tape labeled B was found underneath the crate. It contained what sounded like direct recordings of conversations presumably recorded through the wall. Just leave it with Harlan. No, I don't trust that version. This one's final. I'm not changing it again. Why are there 2 envelopes? And once, Lurikin Hasedornaden. If anything happens, burn the drafts. The voices were faint, but one stood out. Male. Not Michael, not Caleb, not Grover. Unknown. Fingerprint dusting on the recorder returned partial prints. No match in local or national databases. But latent impressions found on the inside of the compartment wall matched one of the earliest unidentified prints from the wine cellar crawl space where Michael Whitmore's body had been found. The prints had been partial then, unclear. Now they matched. Someone had been inside the house longer than anyone realized. Someone who hadn't just hidden. He had lived in the walls. Listened, watched, and waited. A new name was assigned internally to the case file. Abiyud Nirwan. Identity unknown. Prints matched across 5 surfaces. Handwriting possible matches on 2 documents. Speech pattern to be analyzed. Photograph none. Recorded presence 1988-2022. A 34-year span. No one had ever seen him, but he had never left. Later that night, Moreno reviewed the tapes again. In one, the voice whispered, "They always think they can write me out, but paper burns, walls remember." She paused the tape, listened to the silence after, then whispered aloud to no one, "So you're the one who stayed." It wasn't just a crawl space. What they'd assumed was an isolated cavity in the wall of Evelyn Whitmore's bedroom turned out to be part of a larger improvised listening tunnel, narrow, winding, and dry. It extended behind the fireplace through 2 layers of substructure and into the cavity beneath the east stairwell. Someone had carved access points over decades, converting insulation gaps into channels wide enough for a body to slide through. Inside those spaces they found fragments of yellow foam earplugs, cut-down carpet squares, a handmade peephole behind a vent in the parlor, and 4 more cassette tapes labeled C1 to C4, all of them stored in a padded tin. 2 were warped beyond playback, but the others worked. The first recording was dated by hand June 2001. It began with ambient noise, the tick of a wall clock, floorboards above creaking. Then made the Rishid Riyu one. She's laughing with the new housekeeper. Same voice, new scent. She won't stay long. The second tape was dated April 2014. It opened with Evelyn's voice clearer this time. "Just drop the papers on the hall table. You don't need to read them. Everything's in motion." Then a whisper layered beneath it. "She says that every time." Between the tapes, fingerprints were recovered. Same as before. Same unknown. Now designated as W01, active presence in the house for at least 2 documented decades, possibly more. Still no confirmed sightings, no photographs, no employee files, no fingerprints in any legal database. But something else was found inside the parlor wall. Behind a removable panel near the southeast corner, pinned between insulation and brick, was a bundle of dark brown hair, knotted, coated in dust, but intact. Forensics lifted 3 follicles with root. DNA processing took 48 hours. The result came back with 1 match in the state's extended family search database. Evelyn M. Whitmore, maternal relation, 99.82% certainty. The unknown male W01 was directly related to Evelyn Whitmore. The discovery changed everything. Theories were rewritten, motives reclassified. It wasn't just a stranger in the walls, it was family. Detective Moreno stood in front of the crime board the next morning, staring at the index card that had once simply read, "Unknown Observer, W01. She replaced it with a new label, W01 male est, born 1950s, 60s, genetically tied to Evelyn Whitmore. Likely son or half-brother. Current status unconfirmed, presumed alive." Angela Merrick, when informed of the match, sat in silence for nearly a full minute. Then said, "She called him her shadow." Moreno looked up. "What?" Angela nodded slowly. Not to his face, only to herself. "I thought it was a metaphor. I didn't know it was real." The tapes continued, revealing fragments. One phrase repeated 3 times on different recordings. "She's changing it again. She's changing it again. She's changing it again." It had become a mantra. Not observation, resentment. In early forensic drawings of the hidden network, a final point stood out, a blocked-off conduit between the main wall cavity and the fireplace flue. That section had never been searched. Investigators had assumed the space was sealed. When they dismantled the upper brick housing, they found a hollow. Inside it, a leather satchel brittle from age. Contents: a sealed envelope addressed in Evelyn's handwriting. "For C, when he's ready to be seen." A set of old letters, none mailed, written by Evelyn to an unnamed male. A photo, black and white, dated 1963, showing Evelyn as a young woman beside a teenage boy. The envelope was empty. But the letters weren't. One read, "You will never understand the sacrifice I made to keep you near, but never visible." Another, "Way in, Mr. Warnyo." The attic wasn't meant to be punishment. It was the only place they wouldn't ask questions. And one more, "Versa, the house is yours even if the law says otherwise. You know its bones. You live inside it. No one else ever did." The implication was chilling. Other one hadn't been hiding. He'd been raised that way. DNA from the envelope confirmed it had been sealed by Evelyn herself. The photo was enhanced. The boy beside her shared facial features with her archived school portrait, jawline, eyebrow. He was estimated to be 14-16 at the time the photo was taken. No records showed Evelyn had ever had a child. But one line in a 1965 diary entry recovered years earlier and dismissed at the time now resurfaced. The silence was necessary. I couldn't let them take him from me. When investigators returned to the house, they followed a final lead. One of the hidden channels ended near the chimney shaft in the basement, partially bricked. The wall there had always been considered original load-bearing masonry. It wasn't. Behind it, they found a sealed crawl space only accessible from inside the chimney. Clean out a space no wider than a coffin padded with cloth and sealed by hand. Inside, no body, but a mattress, a drawer, a spoon, a folded shirt, a cigarette lighter, and a ring of keys. One key matched a lock that hadn't existed since 1984, the door to Evelyn's private sitting room removed during renovations. Whoever lived there remembered the house before it changed. A final tape labeled "Last Night" was found in a pocket of the mattress. On it, the same voice, but no longer calm. Breathing heavy. Then when he came in too fast. He didn't knock. I saw his hands. Then silence. Then was her rates. She said it would be mine. Not his. Not the boy who left, the boy who stayed. Click. End of tape. The last confirmed movement inside the walls occurred the same night Michael Whitmore disappeared. A fiber pulled from his sweater matched the insulation lining the fireplace shaft. And a partial footprint, bare arched size 11, was found on a ceiling joist above the parlor left in dust. Too large to be Michael's. Too fresh to be decades old. Too deliberate to be forgotten. The Whitmore house was sealed by order of the court at 6:00 a.m. on a Monday. By then, all evidence had been cataloged: the tapes, the journal entries, the fingerprints, the DNA samples, the photo, and the contents of the hidden crawl spaces. The house itself had become a crime scene, a memorial, and a puzzle the law was still trying to solve. The presence of W01 was now officially recognized by the Attorney General's office as a suspected principal in multiple deaths and posthumous estate interference. But recognition wasn't location. He was still missing. 3 days after the house was sealed, customs authorities in New York flagged a passport application filed under the name James Merrow Carter, flagged by biometric facial match software. The photo was grainy, taken at a small-town pharmacy west of Buffalo, but the match returned a 76% similarity score to the 1963 photo of Evelyn standing beside the unidentified teenager, presumed to be W01. The applicant had listed his date of birth as July 1960. No place of birth. Emergency contact, none. Destination, Vancouver, Canada. Departure date, unknown. The passport was approved, but the man never picked it up. Instead, a plain white envelope arrived at the Springfield field office. No return address. Inside, a handwritten letter. The penmanship was old-fashioned, slightly trembling, but careful, the kind used by people who didn't trust computers. It read, "You've done good work, but you're still looking in the wrong direction. I never left. I just learned how not to be seen. Evelyn made promises. So did I. She said I could have the house. Now I want the rest." There was no signature. Only a small mark at the bottom corner. A single letter drawn in looping script. The note was fingerprinted. Smudged deliberately. No usable prints. But the handwriting matched annotations found in the fireplace satchel marginalia, believed to have been written between 1985 and 2005. And the paper rag blend, slightly yellowed, came from a type of notepad sold exclusively by a print shop in Vermont. An agent was dispatched. The store owner said the pads had been custom-made for a long-term customer who ordered them in bulk every 3 years since 1998. Under the name Walter Hayden. Paid cash. Shipped to no address, pickup only. The shop hadn't seen him since last winter. But they had a security camera. The image showed an older man, tall, thin, wearing a flat cap and heavy scarf even indoors. He never removed his gloves. No clear shot of his face, but enough for facial match software to return a 52% similarity to 101's known features. Moreno stared at the image for a long time. He's still moving, but not running. Angela Merrick, upon seeing the letter, didn't hesitate. "He's not going north," she said. "He's going under." When asked to explain, she gave them a name. Wharton Cold, a property owned by the Whitmore family since 1937. A former hunting cabin in the northern Pennsylvania woods decommissioned in the 1970s and never sold. No heating, no plumbing, no road access since the mid-80s. Angela remembered Evelyn once mentioning it offhand. If the whole world falls apart, at least we'll still have Wharton. The records were still intact. The cabin was never listed in the estate, never mentioned in any of Evelyn's wills. But tax was paid on it every year consistently from an offshore holding company, traced back to a trust Evelyn had set up in 1991. That trust was still active. And the last withdrawal, 3 weeks ago. A $400 charge at a general supply store in rural Lycoming County paid in cash. On surveillance tape, a man in a faded field coat purchased 2 butane tanks, dehydrated meal kits, batteries, ruinous, a shortwave radio. He didn't speak except to nod. He paid cash. Wore gloves. The clerk remembered only one thing. He asked if the signal reached far. I said, "Depends where you're standing." He said, "I'll be under the hill." A search team mobilized before sunrise. By afternoon, they reached the Wharton property. The cabin was locked from the inside. They didn't knock. The cabin stood in silence. Nestled deep in the woods of Wharton State Forest, the structure looked as if it had been waiting to be found. Moss ran thick across the roof. The windows were dark, sealed from the inside. The lock on the front door was not modern iron latch, thick wood bar, but the air inside was warm. Someone had been there recently. The team entered at 6:18 p.m. Flashlights swept through narrow hallways lined with stacked newspapers, crates of dry food, and a rusted camping stove still warm to the touch. On the far side of the room, a writing desk, organized, precise. And pinned to the wall above it, a single sheet of paper. Hand-drawn, a full architectural layout of the Whitmore house. Every room, every tunnel, every wall cavity. Labeled, annotated, with times, arrows, X's. Some rooms had names. Mother's Echo, Evelyn's bedroom. The Eye, the east parlor vent. First key, the kitchen subfloor. Mine, the crawl space behind the master closet. At the bottom corner, a single note. Written in pencil, underlined twice. He never earned it. Below the drawing, carved directly into the wood paneling with a blade. The house was mine. Beneath it, the walls were mine. And finally, she was never yours. No one was inside. No bedding, no personal items, no discarded clothing. Only one object remained that hadn't appeared in any other location. A photograph printed grainy faded. Jenna and Mallory Whitmore, age 8. Taken in the front yard of the house in summer. Evelyn stood behind them, hand on Jenna's shoulder, expression neutral. In the background near the shadow of the porch post, a silhouette. Small, barely visible. A figure that for decades had never been identified. Until now. Forensics matched fingerprints from the cabin to the same W01 profile, conclusively linking all crawl spaces tapes, objects, and the fireplace satchel. He had been in every room, and every room had belonged to him, at least in his mind. No trace of him was found beyond the cabin. But on the back of the Whitmore house blueprint, they discovered writing that had been pressed into the paper from the force of pencil. She wrote me out, I wrote myself back in. And beneath it, no one else understood the house. Not Michael, not Denise, not the nurse. They didn't hear it breathe. The letter was dated 2 days before Michael Whitmore arrived at the estate. Weeks passed. The Whitmore house remained sealed. The estate was never transferred. The inheritance contested again, this time not by claim, but by absence. With no viable heir, the property was designated for liquidation. The structure itself was scheduled for demolition, but demolition never came. 3 times crews arrived. 3 times they left without explanation. The third crew chief quit mid-assignment. His only comment, "I'm not taking a wall apart that sounds like it's still listening." Detective Moreno visited the house one final time before it was turned over to the state. She walked through every room, paused in the master bedroom, stared at the faint outline where the false wall had been opened, ran her hand along the plaster, and whispered not to anyone, "I know you're not gone." Angela Merrick disappeared from protective custody 4 months after her last statement. Her room was left neat. No note, no forwarding information. Only her ID placed on the pillow. And a spiral-bound notepad cover torn, filled with single-sentence entries. It was never about the will. She never wanted him to live in the house, but she never told him to leave. Maybe the inheritance was just about who stayed the longest. The Whitmore property remains untouched. The furniture is still there. The lights are off. The windows are boarded, but the mail keeps arriving. And sometimes at night, the neighbor says he sees a light move behind the second-floor curtain. Just once. Just for a second. As if someone is still watching.